Welcome into Dragon Ball Super Dope. My name is Kyle. Thank you for checking this out. I am joined today for my monthly conversation with a writer for CBR.com and one of the biggest nerds I know, and I mean that with the highest modicum of respect, my friend, Anthony Gramuglia. How are you, Anthony?
I'm doing all right today. I can't complain. I had some tea. I played Fire Emblem for 10 hours before realizing that the sun went down. I'm doing okay.
What kind of tea was it?
Oh, some oolong tea. It's the most Britishy British tea I can think of that is not from Britain. It's like a Twinings oolong. So it's, stolen. So it's stolen from another country.
Wow.
And sold under a British. There's nothing more British than that.
That's true, man. British imperialism alive and well in 2020. But oolong tea, Fire Emblem video games, and just being generally non-productive for the sake of being a geek. Quality stuff, my friend.
Heck yeah, it is.
So me and Ant have been getting together once a month for, I don't know, the last 3-4 months now.
A little bit, yeah.
I think this might be month 3. And the idea is, Anthony being a writer for CBR.com, he quite often touches on Dragon Ball topics. And, when we became friends through the Great Weeb Wars of 2019, we realized that we have a lot of similar opinions and tastes on these types of things. So whenever he writes a cool Dragon Ball article, it always sparks an interesting discussion for us. And he had one that sort of touched on one. So once we started doing these topics, we started to keep like a short list of ideas of Dragon Ball topics that we want to dive a little bit deeper into. If you have any suggestions for those topics, by the way, Mr. or Miss Listener, let us know. Dragon Ball dbsuperdope at gmail.com, dbsuperdope on Instagram, at dbsuperdope1 on Twitter. Let us know your recommendations for these types of topics. We do have a short list going, and one of them, since the list started, I wanted to talk about the character of Uub. In my opinion, one of the most underutilized characters in Dragon Ball history. And Ant recently wrote an article that outlined a little bit of background information about the Majin transformation itself. So I think the biggest example that you could draw from is Majin Vegeta being taken over by Babidi in the Buu arc. What made you write that article in the first place?
Pure SEO. Purely search engine optimization, because it was looking at topics I could discuss. And I was like, oh, that's a popular topic. I'll write about that. And then just kind of saw, how can I write about it? Sometimes it's a purely cynical reason why you write some stuff, but it leads into some creative, like, speculation. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, here's a purely driven by what people are interested in, what people are looking at. In this case, the Majin Mark, the Majin Buu, Majin Vegeta, Babidi, Bibbidi, Uub. And you just kind of go, okay, so here's a topic a bazillion people have written about so far. How can you make it different? How can you look at it through a different lens? And then you try. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if it does, you might get something interesting. But I do feel like there's a lot of stuff I was thinking about and speculating about while writing it. I didn't get a chance to write about. Or find room to write about, because you got to make sure it's tailor-suited to that one topic, that one focus. And with Uub especially, there's so much potential to this character. And it just feels like they never tapped into it. Even though I feel like it's obvious where they can go with this. Like, there's so many obvious, easy ways you can make this character really, really interesting. And they just never really have yet. I don't know, I find it very disappointing in some respects.
Well, from the SEO perspective, I can kind of see it going from 2 different ways. Like, people probably have questions around the character of Uub, but I think also people would probably have questions around the concept of Vegeta being possessed by Babidi. Is it Babidi or Bibbidi? It's Babidi.
Babidi. Yeah, Bibbidi's dead, kind of, quote unquote.
Fuck Bibbidi. Babidi's the son, and then he's gonna give us Buu. Bibbidi Babidi Buu. I think people probably have some misconceptions around the character of Uub, but also around, Vegeta being possessed, overtaken, or whatever. I think that it's a pretty no shit thing, Vegeta lets himself be possessed by Babidi in order to access that prior rage that he once felt in his heart when he was, a truly evil Saiyan, and before he was pacified by all these earth wenches and children and the like. He wanted to be able to access that sort of rage and just like complete disregard for life. And he willingly lets himself become possessed in order to throw that caution away. So I could understand why maybe a newer fan to Dragon Ball wouldn't understand that if they didn't maybe watch the sub first or read the comics or whatever, might have questions. But Uub himself, I feel like there's some misconceptions around him as a character, both how he came into existence, where he is now in Dragon Ball Super. And I would kind of say some of the GT stuff, although I think my biggest beef with Uub in GT is that he's just not utilized in very interesting ways. But before we get there, Uub himself, let's like dispel any kind of misconceptions about him. Goku is killing Kid Buu with the super spirit bomb. He, this is another commonly discussed thing in Dragon Ball history. He's a Super Saiyan when he's pushing it at Kid Buu. Because he's no longer building the spirit bomb. He doesn't need that pure of heart thing. But whatever, he's pushing it at Kid Buu, and he makes like the declaration, I guess, to himself, like, "Oh man, I really hope you would be reborn into a good guy. That'd be super dope."
So I could like, punch you a lot and fight you and then get punched by you. Be a great time.
It would basically be Goku's favorite thing to do.
Oh my God, yes. So he can just fight for the fun of it forever.
And it would be, it'd be for the fun of it. It wouldn't be like a life and death circumstances. So a common misconception there, I think, is people think that somehow the Dragon Balls are involved. I definitely have been guilty of confusing those things in the past, but Goku basically says it out loud. King Yama hears him, and he's like, all right. And he reincarnates Kid Buu into Uub.
One thing I thought was
later.
One thing I found that was interesting about while researching the one article I was writing, though, there was a lot of misconceptions about the Majin power, sure, but there was also a lot of things that is stated by Akira Toriyama and stated in like interviews and just manga notes essentially that make it that imply that Majin Buu himself wasn't created by Bibidi, but was rather like this primordial essence that existed since the dawn of time. And that just by Bibidi's wishes for Buu to be born kind of gave it shape, essentially. So it feels almost like a reoccurrence of that to an extent. That Goku's wishes for Buu to be born and King Enma kind of just going, oh yeah, sure, why not? It almost feels like a kind of a reoccurrence of that same thing that Bibidi did, to an extent.
100%. Except he's not doing it from the perspective of like evil sorcerer type. He's Yama, Enma, whatever we're calling him. He is the guy at the way station. Like he makes those decisions. That's his role in the universe.
Exactly. So, he signs the checks. he does all the paperwork.
Exactly. He's part of the process. He's a cog in the system.
Exactly.
So Emma brings him back as a good guy. For Dragon Ball Z, it's well known. We got the 10-year jump forward in the last couple of episodes of Dragon Ball Z. They meet up at the 25th Tenkaichi Budokai, I want to say.
Yeah, I think that was it. 25th.
I want to say 25th. I know
you're probably right.
I want to say GT is the 28th at the beginning of the Super 17 saga. I'm pretty sure that one's the 28th. I think this one's the 25th.
Yeah.
Either way, doesn't matter.
Because they stopped doing it for a while, and then they started doing it again, and then everyone died thanks to Vegeta.
What a butthole that Vegeta guy is! I swear. So,
but then they let him back in. So
let him back in the club, no problem. Yeah. He helped save the Earth. With Uub coming in at the end of Z, I love those episodes. I haven't watched those episodes in a minute, but I love those episodes and like the excitement because you don't know what to expect. The cast, the characters don't know what to expect, but Goku was like letting people in on the side, like, "Hey man, he's gonna be here." And then when they finally see Uub as like this scrawny little kid, as pictured here in this dope ass action figure, he everyone kind of like laughs at Goku and they're like, that's the kid. That's the reincarnation of Kid Buu, who's going to be this ultimate warrior, blah, blah, blah. And they have this really fun, excellent fight. I mean, it's base Goku just kind of dicking around with this little kid Uub, who, if you think about it, actually, Uub in that battle is a little reminiscent of what they ultimately did with Broly in the Super movie, Dragon Ball Super Broly, in that he very much learns to fight as the fight happens. Uub didn't have a ton of martial arts experience, but he was trained to some extent, but obviously not on the scale of Goku. But he still manages to keep up with the speed, I think is probably most impressive. And eventually they get to the realization Goku is like, you don't know how to fly? Wow, kid, you don't know shit. All right, let's go. Screw this tournament. We have to train you now.
Basically. And it's a great little moment. It's just purely like just Goku's entire character sums up in a moment. Like, oh, cool, you don't know how to do this thing. Let me teach you so we can fight some more. Essentially. And it's just interesting because like it seems so rehearsed and so planned leading up to the fight, and then you realize, that he has no idea what he's really doing. He just knows it. He just knows it's the promise of a good fight, and then trains him to be this great fighter.
I think what's interesting about Uub too in that fight is even though we know he's got minimal martial arts experience, he continues to adapt through the fight, and all of a sudden, despite having been outmatched just seconds and moments ago, all of a sudden he's fighting on par with his opponent. And despite there being a disconnect in their abilities, this person is overcoming through raw potential, sometimes emotion, because Goku throws out all those taunts at Uub about his parents being fat ass pieces of ass or whatever. Whatever he gets that power up through, whether it be emotion or just a natural development in martial arts through the fight. Who does that sound like? What other character just suddenly gets some massive power-ups despite having suddenly been outmatched just moments prior?
It sounds really, when you put it like that, it sounds almost like some other character. I forget his name.
Yeah.
The G.
I think he loves the color orange and his hair is stupid looking. But
yeah, no matter what color he dyes it.
Right? It doesn't count. I don't care what color swap we're talking about. It looks dumb as hell. But it's that similar kind of personality from like a martial arts perspective. But they couldn't be more different. Like Uub is just so timid and reserved and scared and doesn't want to upset anybody. And Goku is like, I don't give a shit. I'll blow up a car with a Kamehameha. I don't care. I'm just trying to get better at martial arts.
And it really works as a kind of like a this is how it ends where it begins kind of thing for the whole Dragon Ball story. Like Goku starts off training under Master Roshi to fight at the tournament, and he has like this ridiculous fight with his master, which ultimately he ends up kind of losing just barely in the first World Tournament arc. And the whole series ends, or at least it did until GT, with Goku taking on a student. At this world tournament that meant so much to him in his early years. Kind of in that same sort of vein of being taught while fighting as it is in Dragon Ball. Like, thematically, the fight with Uub really has a lot more going on than I feel people kind of give it credit for. We kind of, because it's so far removed from Dragon Ball, we forget the echoes of Dragon Ball in the whole series by the time Z comes around. So this echo from the beginning of Dragon Ball at the end of Z really brings the whole story full circle. More so, I feel, than even how Super ends with, Goku and Vegeta having one last fight. Because that brings us back to the beginning of Z, but it doesn't bring us back to the beginning of the whole story.
Very true.
And I think we forget often that Dragon Ball, there is no division between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z in the manga. It's all just one giant story. So it really does feel like the end of an era, I think. But that's also my bias on that. I think it's just
I think that makes a ton of sense. What drives me banana, I mean, you're right. The callback to the beginning of Dragon Ball and how Uub ultimately takes on the student role and Goku takes on that teacher role. It's a beautiful thing to see. What drives me bananas about, I guess, Dragon Ball, but specifically the character of Uub, and it's not the character's fault. It's nobody's fault. Dragon Ball ends with, all right, Uub, let's go train you. And Dragon Ball GT begins with, okay, Uub, you're all trained. See you later. I want to see what happens in those years. Like, I'd like to see that development of a relationship between Goku and Uub. And that's one of the things that I'm hopeful we'll see in Super. But his utilization in GT, he starts it off. Okay, you're all trained up. Exactly. What utilization? He's there at the start just to say, okay, this amount of time has passed. You're all trained. That's been a lot of time. Goodbye. And then he pops up several other times in GT. I think it's like 3 or 4 times, just to be one of those characters who like holds off the big bad so Goku can charge up or rest up for a minute until he has like, I guess what a lot of us would consider his biggest moment in GT is when he eventually fuses with Majin Buu again. He just has.
It looks no different. It's the only fusion. It's the only fusion I think in the series up until, not counting the Namekian fusions, where the character doesn't physically change at all. Like
doesn't his outfit change though?
His outfit changes, but that's not like. I mean, like you look at like the more dramatic changes even with Super Buu in the Fusion Saga in Buu. Even when that happens, Super Buu's body physically changes with his new clothing. Like his jawline becomes more pronounced. His body becomes proportioned slightly differently. His tentacle thing at the top of his head extends further. There are physical changes, despite the fact that the costume's the most dramatic change. There are physical changes to Super Buu's body as well. Whereas with Uub, it just feels like he's just kind of, I don't know. It never felt very visually stimulating when he fused. And I think that represents, to a lesser extent, how little it mattered in the vast scheme of the story. There is no visual sign that Buu mattered or that Uub mattered in all of GT. Like, think about how often they reference Majin Buu in Super versus how much they mentioned him in GT, or how significant Buu is in the vast scheme of the story in both. But
I would say that Majin Buu has been a more. I mean, it's also because Dragon Ball Super is twice as long as Dragon Ball GT is, but
that's true. But even proportionally,
Majin Buu has been a little bit more involved in the story than he ever was in GT, I think.
Yeah, and like that's the thing that's interesting. I feel like you look at Super, right? One of the first things they mention with that Beerus mentions is, oh, Buu, this guy beat Buu, in terms of Goku, Buu steals food from Beerus and that pisses Beerus off. Like in one arc, Buu plays more of a role when he's not even like a central character. He's like a supporting tertiary character in that whole arc with Beerus. And has more of a role in one arc than Uub had in an entire series. And that arc is like 10 episodes long.
I mean, we do have a much more memorable scene in that respect in the Battle of Gods arc with Majin Buu's interaction with Beerus. The no kitty, this is my pot pie, this is my pudding. That is something that is going to be burned into Dragon Ball's fans' heads for years and years to come for a few reasons. Obviously, it's a hilarious scene. It's cool to see who you previously had at the top of the power charts for Dragon Ball now go against this new god of destruction and see that face off and see Majin Buu just put to absolute shame. That's very cool. And then the third part of it is that's the first new Dragon Ball that we had and since 2008, Son Goku and his friends. So first new Dragon Ball in 5 years total, first new beginnings of a series since 96, 97. So that's like a perfect storm of a moment. I don't think that equates to a very legitimate part in the story. I think they've since started to, and I think the Moro arc is an excellent example of it. They teased us a little bit with him getting involved for the Tournament of Power, and thinking back, like, you can't get Buu involved in that kind of circumstance because he would be so OP. The Tournament of Power would feel like it has no stakes, and it already felt like it had no stakes because we've already seen the end of Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, we know he's going to get through it all right.
But
It's got to train Uub.
With Uub in GT, I mean, he essentially has a few different. He shows up and saves Pan from getting killed after he
Mhm.
assumes Goku's dead and fights Baby Vegeta. Gets his ass whooped. Eventually fuses with Majin Buu. Is more powerful, so that way he can go back and stall for more time, and then gets his
Mhm.
ass whooped again.
Mhm.
And then the other part is because we saw the fusion with Majin Buu, we see him at the beginning of the Super 17 arc dressed as Papaya Man.
Oh
Stupid.
yeah.
It's the Great Saiyan Man. It's Oob's version of the Great Saiyan Man. Let's be real.
Yep.
Papaya Man enters the Tenkaichi Budokai, I believe it's the 28th tournament, and he gets to the
Yeah.
finals. He has every intention of winning to try to get prize money or whatever, probably for his poor ass village.
Yeah.
And he has that internal monologue with Majin Buu where he's like, "No, Mr. Satan is the Earth's hero. You need to lose, blah blah blah." Like
Yeah.
those are the most prevalent parts, probably. He
And
also
maybe
makes
some stuff during Super 17
he
and the
makes a
fight.
suggestion during Omega Shenron
Mm.
when Goku and Vegeta are getting ready to do a fusion. He's like, "Yo, that's fusion. Fusion's dope. Hey, Goten, Trunks, and Gohan, any of you guys want to try to do a fusion?" And the three of them are like, "You can't just do fusion, Oob. God, you need to learn it first, dummy." I
Assume
wish that he did a fusion dance with one of those guys. That'd have been dope.
I would love that. But it's funny because it's like, they say that to the fusion essentially. Like,
Mhm.
you know how to fuse, you fused person? It's like he's already a fusion, really. I mean, I don't know. I would have loved to see some really unorthodox fusions. That's the thing, I think that was one missed opportunity also with GT. That when and this is kind of going off of like fan art I've seen and fan creations after the fact. So this again is in hindsight. Fans can come up with more creative alternatives to what the canon actually shows.
Sure.
How cool would it have been if Majub, as he is in GT, was like a partial mix between Boo and the Majub form, like with the holes and with a Majin Buu belt and with like a pink skin, but also like the
He's
same
got a
personality.
mohawk, but he's also got a tentacle at the top of his head.
That'd be cool, or some variation thereof. Yeah, how cool would that have been? Like some type of weird hybrid. That would have been really interesting to see visually. I
Yeah.
mean, I get why they didn't, but it
Yeah,
wouldn't
that'd have
feel
been
recognizable.
that would have been
But it
kind
would
of
be
ugly.
interesting.
Would have been tough
Oh, it
to
would have
pull
been
off, I feel.
disgusting. It would have been disgusting to look at, but it would have been cool in
So
a weird way.
it's more definitely akin to like the Namekian fusion as opposed to the Metamoran fusion, outside of the fact that
Hmm.
it's permanent. Metamoran's not.
Exactly.
No physical appearance changes, minimal changes to his outfit or whatever.
Mm.
And this is where I think GT teased us a little bit. I don't know if they did it on purpose or they just like didn't want to continue to go down that road because they didn't care about the character. But
Mm.
when you put Majin Buu and Oob together to make Majub, he gains the power to be able to transform people into chocolate with a Majin beam with his two fingers instead of out
Hmm.
the top of a tentacle. It kind of comes into play wherein he is able to bust out of Baby Vegeta after he gets absorbed, eaten, whatever. But that's pretty much it. So they give him the chocolate beam, which, by the way, given the color of Oob's skin, just gonna say it now, maybe it's a little racist, but they don't give
Maybe.
him any of the other magical abilities that Boo has.
Mm.
And I feel like, again, I'm not sure if it was on purpose or they just didn't care to explore it. Missed opportunity with his just given like all the mystical background that Majin Buu's energy has as like this beginning
Hmm.
evil fucking energy at the beginning of the universe. That's such a rich thing that's ambiguous enough where, especially in a series like Dragon Ball, where they're just famous for
Hmm.
just random power pulls out of their ass,
Yeah.
Talk about a deep indescript power like that. Oob could be the next Goku in that he just always has an excuse. He's got the Kid Buu power from his reincarnation. You know what I mean?
Mm. Or how strange it would be physically to see a human being do some of the cartoon logic that Boof does in Dragon Ball. like when Buu like rips a piece of his stomach out and just throws it like a weapon. Like imagine if like Uub just ripped a piece of his flesh off and made a weapon out of it,
So I
or
don't
regenerated.
necessarily think that it needs to be the same kind of power, but the idea
Mhm.
that Kid Buu has that power, why don't we try to figure out a way for Oob to have, not quite the same thing, but powers on a different kind of level? Like at the
Yeah,
beginning of Dragon Ball Super, they make the very active effort to, reset the power scaling by introducing the gods of destruction and the angels.
hmm
And I think with the Moro arc more recently, them introducing characters who've got magical abilities, it's another attempt at that. Like we've already reached such, incalculable heights. We need to
yeah,
introduce a new element.
balance it out.
Wouldn't Oob be like prime time for that? I'd think.
Well, that's interesting. Interesting thing about like the Majin power in general. It doesn't seem to follow the same logic that Ki and other forms of energy follow. It is its own mystical energy that doesn't really equate perfectly to what the main characters have accumulated. I think it's one of the big missing elements of Oob in GT. But I hope that when they bring Oob into Super, if they do, that they'll kind of rectify it. Because magic is so unusual, because magic is so different from the typical concussive force that we see with the Saiyans and the Namekians, that, well, at least some of the Namekians, obviously, they make the Dragon Balls. So there's some magic there too.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting set of abilities that doesn't get explored very often in Dragon Ball at all. It's very much science fantasy. But over time, the science, I don't even say science because that doesn't make sense. It's not really scientifically, Ki makes no scientific sense whatsoever. But they kind of made it out to be this logical consistency. And I feel that lack of imagination takes its is most obvious in GT because they aren't really thinking imaginatively with what they have already. They kind of focus. The problem with GT is they realized that they were trying to fit into what Dragon Ball did previously without really expanding on what they have and building upon that. So it feels very repetitious at times. Early GT is reminiscent of early Dragon Ball, and later GT tries to recapture Z, but it never tries to be its own thing. It never really evolves. And the problem with that, I think, is that Oob represents the next step. Oob really is continuing where Z left off. Whatever they would have, if Akira Toriyama made a fourth arc, well, not fourth, because technically the Buu is the fourth arc with Saiyan, Cell, and Frieza.
Billion.
But let's say a fifth arc. Whatever he would have done with Oob, GT didn't do it. He would have had
100%
some.
no. They didn't know what to do with him, so they let him fall into like a more typical anime shonen character role of it's that next powerful guy. It's like, oh no, the next hope is this guy, although we know that the protagonist is going to overcome and come back and win everything, and this guy's just buying us a few minutes in order for that
Yeah,
person to come back. That's the
he
role.
became.
He almost takes on a Vegeta role.
I was going to compare him to Worf from Star Trek, honestly. He's the guy who
Yeah.
gets beaten up to make it look like he's the guy's a serious threat.
Yeah, I think we talked about that in one of our discussions a few months back. Warfing, right? Is that what we're
Yeah,
calling it?
I think so. Yeah. No, it is basically Worfing because it's like he doesn't do anything really on his own despite having time to, you know? He has this great, big new power up. He gets beaten up.
Yeah,
He,
at best he just buys a little bit of time.
yeah, for the real heroes to shine. And that always struck me as very off-putting.
What drives
Especially
me
with
nuts about GT is that he is like supposed to be somebody who Goku just spent the last 10 years or whatever training, but he's so frequently lumped in with Gohan, Goten, and Trunks, who, by all accounts in this narrative, have been just lazy slackers who are like very happy with the peace of the world. Like, way to denigrate what the dude's accomplished and worked toward over the last 10 years.
exactly. Like it just
Lumping
strikes
him
me as
in with
very
these degenerates.
yeah, and not to mention that with that in general, like it feels like Oob just kind of gets looped. Yeah, it feels like Oob just becomes like another Goten. You know, he
Yeah.
just kind of shows up. Makes a
Oh,
few
look, Goku's black
lines.
kid's here. Gosh, terrible.
Basically, and what sucks, there's so much potential they could do with Oob in Super. Now that I feel like Super did a really good job at bringing back characters who didn't get enough play in the Buu arc or later on in GT. I feel like they did a lot of good stuff with Piccolo in Super, especially compared to how they treat him in GT.
Yeah.
I feel that Bulma gets a lot more play in Super than GT. I feel that obviously Gohan has some good moments in Super, but he had some good moments in Buu also.
I honestly think Gohan in GT isn't a bad character. I mean, he's not very few moments, but the moments he does get are really cool.
I think his highlight is when he faces off against what's the metal guy?
Rildo.
Yeah. When he comes back from hell and he has that little like brief fight.
Oh, and he gets his arm fucking half
metalized. Yeah, that's
my
a cool
favorite.
Scene.
My favorite Gohan GT moment is like right after he gets taken over by Baby, and Piccolo shows up to try to stop him, and he fucking murders Piccolo in cold blood with that Kamehameha and that crater with the X across it. It's like thinking about it now still gives me goosebumps. That's a cool moment.
It's chilling. It's a good.
It's also
scene.
evil Gohan, so I don't know if it counts, but
I mean, it's
so cool
Baby.
To think about.
It's Baby, so I mean, is it really Gohan? Yeah, it kind of is.
I'll take it.
Kind of counts.
It's one of the most badass things I've seen Gohan do since that time he killed Cell. So
basically,
I'll take it.
And I mean, I even like Goofy Gohan as like in high school, being his like dork ass self. It's fun, but
I love Great Saiyan Man.
No, it's fun, but it's not the same as like really seeing him take charge in the core narrative of that arc and make it and contribute to the whole story. I feel he does that in Super. I feel like he did that to an extent in Buu, but GT just kind of dropped the ball with everyone. I think to an extent. I think
everybody except Goku, basically. Goku's the whole thing.
And I feel like if Super continues past the point where Z left off, they have a really good chance to play with two characters I feel like were really underutilized: Pan and Uub. My ears fell out. my earbuds fell out. I'm not sure if you don't see it on video.
Good recovery, man. Good recovery.
Yeah, I'll just slow my voice down and hope it all works out for the best.
So we're fast approaching. We've already been introduced to Pan in the anime and the manga. Uub has been referenced 2 different times. And I think that there's no reason to reference him 2 different times unless they're going to get us ready to, introduce him as a real character in this story now. Unless they're just trying to be assholes, which I guess is totally a possibility as well. But they reference him 1 time leading up to the U6, U7 tournament and how I believe he's just recently born. So he's like a baby, the reincarnation of Kid Buu as a new kid. I think it's Kaioshin tells Goku, gives him the news, but he's, still just a little baby, can't do much. And then in the recruitment arc, we'll call it, for the Tournament of Power, Goku's running around, getting all his best buds and former enemies to help him whoop some ass on a universal scale. He is told by Dende that there is a young boy with some immense power in a village who is the reincarnation of Majin Buu. He's not ready to fight now, but Dende paves the way to say, hey, Goku, when the time is right, it's not now, but when the time is right, you should consider training this kid and you should, help him harness his power. Goku's like, me? Nah, I'm a bum. That's not a good thing for me to do. And Dende's like, nah, you should think about that. And Goku says, okay. And that's the end of it. But now that they've given us that very solid, very specifically, very intentionally their exchange, they got to be getting us ready to bring him in, right?
There has to be something going on with that. They're clearly, you can't keep building between the end of the fight with Buu and the end of the series forever. There has to be a point where you continue past. Especially because Super does a great job at filling in the blanks, but it doesn't do a great job at continuing past with territory we don't really know. You can't build forever in a finite space.
Yeah.
And they're running out of space.
They need to move beyond it. And I hope that they're kind of priming us in order to do that. But that last reference for Uub was just before Tournament of Power. I don't remember which chapter specifically that would have been, but it would have been probably in the 30s or 40s. Probably
Mm.
late 30s, early 40s in terms of what chapter that would. Shit, if it's the recruitment arc, let's be real. It's probably in the early 30s. It's probably chapter 30, 31.
Mm.
So he's been now, and now we're in. I say that because we just had chapter 63 come out a couple of days ago. Um, the series length of the series has since doubled. Still no Uub, but in the interim, we have this new arc with Moro. And we're not going to talk about the Moro arc really outside of the fact that it's a arc that is very dependent on magic and just kind of
Mm.
inexplainable things, and you're just supposed to suspend disbelief and say, yeah, this character's got some crazy magic powers, and that's why our heroes are getting their asses whooped. And while it's been a fun, sometimes frustrating read over the last 6-7 months, I think that, and because Majin Buu himself too and the Daikaijin have become pivotal parts in the early part of this arc, magic is becoming a much more common thing. I think as a
Mm.
way to be able to reset the power scaling a little bit.
Mm.
That said, does that pave the way for a magic based character? A character whose origins are based in magic, not his powers or whatever, but maybe they could in the future.
Mm.
With all this magic introduced, are they paving the way for Uub to come in?
I feel like not only are they, but they're going to have to because they know where it follows. And you have to have a sense of, okay, how is magic different from the typical fighting style that Goku incorporates? And I feel like what's going to be interesting is seeing if they continue with Super past Z and they bring in Goku's training with Uub, how they're going to mix Goku's techniques with Kid Buu's lineage in terms of power. How is Goku going to train Uub to mix the two together? And that would be really interesting to see, especially if they go forward with any type of a new adversary in the coming years of creation. What they could do
What
with that.
I think's interesting about Boo, or excuse me, with Oob and then Majub, is he's the reincarnation of Kid Buu, but he's just a human. And at that
Hmm.
point, Krillin is no longer the strongest human on Earth or whatever.
Yeah.
Oob is. But it's because Oob comes from the unfair advantage of being birthed out of, basically, or reborn out of, or re-wished out of this super powerful mystical magic energy. And when we see him in GT, we just experience him as like a super, really strong human. And they never really lean into that magical kind of ambiguity of it,
Hmm.
ambiguity of it. So
Yeah.
what I'd like to see them do, if and when, I think it's a question of when, not if, they bring him into
Hmm.
Super. I would like them to be able to give him more value
Hmm.
to the Z. What do they call them? The Dragon Warriors. Is that the proper
Something like that
term?
at this point. I
Is the
was just calling
can
the Z Fighters, but now I'm like, I'm not sure anymore.
No, bro, you can't call them that. The Kanzenshu
I
forms will
know.
come for you, man.
I
So
know.
believe they're
I
called
made a
the
mistake once or
Dragon,
twice.
the Dragon Warriors. Anthony, God damn it. Although
But
I don't know, I might.
isn't Dragon Warrior's name of another Akira Toriyama related franchise?
You're thinking of Dragon Quest, I believe.
There we
That's
go,
he
Dragon
just did the
Quest,
character designs
which
for
was
the video
called
games.
Dragon Warriors, I think, at one point. Wasn't that called Dragon Warriors in
I
some
don't know. Maybe they did
translations?
like a second or third version of the game, or like a sequel to the game. Maybe it's called Dragon Warriors. I don't know.
I
I
feel like one of the localized versions was like because dumb Americans can't know what Dragon Quest is. You have to have warriors in the title. I
it's true.
don't know what I'm talking about. I think I might. I think that's why I remember, but I could be mistaken. I probably am.
Unless you're thinking of the NES Dragon Ball game that was localized from Famicom to the NES,
That
and they
also I'm
like
thinking of.
changed out some of the skins. I believe that one might have been called Dragon Warrior
Me actually,
or
I'm gonna look this
Karate
up over.
Warrior or some shit.
I'm gonna look this up while talking to you. Actually,
All
okay.
right,
So Dragon
this is good.
Warrior is Dragon Quest.
Okay,
The first Dragon Quest was retitled as Dragon Warrior when it was localized. I just looked it up to make sure I wasn't going crazy. The one you're talking about, localized Dragon Ball NES game, was called Dragon Power.
Dragon Power. Hell yeah.
It's just such a great. That's lovely. It's like, this so original. Like, oh yeah, Dragon Power. Yeah. Can't call them Dragon Balls because,
Nah, Dragon Power. Make it more like a general karate thing. Like paying the licensing.
Exactly.
Dragon Power.
And those cover arts too for Dragon Power. It looks nothing like, if you know it's a Dragon Ball game, it looks so much like a weird Bruce Lee movie.
Yeah, right.
Power, instead of like, what is
power. Dude, the Dragon Power song's gonna be stuck in my head now for the next week. And I can't think of which Dragon Ball Z movie it's from.
Oh God, I'm gonna cheat.
Dragon Power. Is it the first Broly movie? No, is it the second Broly movie? Power.
Might be might be. No, it's. Oh God, it's that one. Okay, you ready for this?
Is it Bio Broly?
Might be Bio Broly.
Is that the best? That's the best thing to come out of Bio Broly. Is that song?
That's the only thing I think that's worth coming from that movie. If I'm not mistaken.
Rules. Nice little guitar solo in that song too. Just saying. I'd cut it in, except I'd get a copyright strike or whatever. Yeah. Fucking YouTube. Ugh. Toei. Double ugh. All right. So we've gone a little bit off on a tangent, but I think it was a very valid one because we've got some legitimate gripes with how they've treated Uub. I would like for Magic to become, as a way to, again, help reset some of the power scaling. I think what Super needs to do when it does come back as an anime, I say this knowing full well that it's an ongoing monthly comic, but what I think they're going to try to do to set up the long-term storytelling possibilities is get away from the Goku and Vegeta show exclusively and try to put in a cast of characters around them that are on par with them even still. I think Broly is a good example of a character who fits in nicely with that description. I think Uub could be one of those as well. I think Goten and Trunks, if they were to age them up and make them a little more serious before they turn into lazy 16-year-old losers who like girls, you could have a stretch of time where they're fun characters to have instead of them just being eternally sidelined. There's a lot of things that they could do to help expand the cast. And I think Uub would be an awesome opportunity to do that with the ability to explain away how much ridiculous magic he's got and why he can be on a team with these Super Saiyan gods, as he's got the reincarnated power of Majin Buu. What more do you need? You don't.
And I also think another element too that's really interesting about Uub is it adds a very, I don't want to sound like a complete social justice warrior about this or anything like that, but it does add
SJW soy boy cuck. How dare you?
Those libtard. It adds a really interesting darker skinned character to the cast, and first off, it makes the cast more diverse, which is there's no downside to that because it's a show with aliens and like tons of
all the aliens are just white dudes except Piccolo, who is a green dude and very much an allegory for a black guy.
Yeah, but it's interesting because also you look at the international appeal of Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is really popular all over the world. So I feel like they could do that could be a small step in making the cast more appealing to an audience all over the world. I mean, because it already appeals to everyone. So why not do a little bit more,
I mean, you think about it too. I mean, Uub, is he of Middle Eastern Indian descent, somewhere in that part of the world?
I always imagined Indian, like Indian inspired. I always imagined that's how I always thought. But I mean, again, it is Akira Toriyama's world of puns, and everyone's name isn't based on ethnicity, but rather based on whatever pun he thought of that week. So
yeah, it's just based off of you are a reincarnated version of this old character, so obviously your name is going to be the old character's name, but backwards.
And that was before it became canon that furries existed canonically in the Dragon Ball universe.
Ugh, don't remind me, man. And then they just disappeared one day. It's like the furry apocalypse happened one day. They just all started not showing up anymore.
But they're like, oh yeah, no, we went through a procedure to make ourselves into furries.
Man,
that's the supposed. I'm glad Kakarot isn't canon, but like there are some gems from that game.
There
Just
was
some.
so many people who tried to like frame Kakarot as like a canon story because Toriyama was helping write the script for a lot of things.
Mm.
And I was like, fuck you. It's not the comic book. Fuck you.
And I
Stop it.
had
This
some,
game
and
is
I,
dumb.
and I had some fun writing stuff about it too when it came out. Like they gave me like the nice little, because Konami, was it Konami? Namco
Yeah, you
Bandai.
got a screener version or a
Screen
screener.
version.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was fun to play. But like, when after you finish playing it, you put the control down, you finish writing your immediate response, you think about like what sticks with you about that game and like what elements they tried to add to it, and you're like, female Ginyu Force member, that's cool. I like that. That's cool. Adding an explanation for why they're furry people in Dragon Ball, that maybe not that didn't work
I'm
out so well.
totally fine with all that extra stuff, whether it be Banyu or like that furry description. My thing with that game was there was a lot of what I'll call low quality playtime. Just flying
Oh
around, collecting
yeah.
coins, flying through hoops, looking for like super time tunnels or whatever to collect a bunch of shit so you could get the resources to get strong enough to fight the next big boss battle. But in the meantime, you're getting stopped by Cybermen and fucking red ribbon
Mm,
pirate fucking aquatic assholes. I actually have one over there
yeah.
hanging out with Godzilla. You're getting stopped by those every 10 feet. Like the quality playtime in
Mm,
that game,
it was
it
repetitive.
it was so frustrating. Like I just
Yeah.
wanted to get from point A to point B without having to stop and have 10 different fights on the way. That's not very
No,
fun to me.
yeah. I agree. And I feel like when playing it, like the first half of my playing experience was so much fun until you realize that the game is just the same. Like every
Uh,
fight is the same. Like with the exception of the boss fights, which were pretty fun, everything felt very samey. And it was funny because at first I was thinking this is just Dragon Ball Budokai 3, but with more in it. Then you realize no, it's actually with less in it
hmm.
because you're really getting more of the same thing over and over again,
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel as
It's
rewarding.
more open world, but somehow that more open world gives you less. Like that was one of the I
Yeah,
remember that part. I haven't played the Budokai games in a fucking minute, but I
yeah.
remember that part of it. I think it's called I want to say it's called Dragon World mode,
A lot of dragon nouns today, I've noticed.
where I mean in a podcast called Dragon Ball Super Dope about a show called Dragon Ball, who'd have guessed, but I think it's the
Mm,
Budokai games. They have a mode called Dragon World where you're essentially just flying from battle to battle, and
mm-hmm.
you're flying around to pick up different items or skills or whatever, but it's essentially you have an open world kind of format between battles. That
Exactly.
Kakarot game gave me a lot of vibes of that, but the encounter rate just made
It was just
it
too
made
much
it
of the same.
like the flying mechanics itself. Once you get comfortable with it, I actually enjoyed flying around in it,
Mm-hmm.
but just bumping into people all the time was fucking annoying. So
Yeah.
Kakarot, that just got us off on a fucking wild tangent. What are
Also
your
wasted
hope?
oob.
Yeah, right. Also, was Uub even in the game?
Oh, I don't remember. I'm sure he was, but I have
I
no
don't know.
memory of it.
I got through the Saiyan Saga stuff and was getting ready to go to Namek before I just gave up. But I know that they've since done Battle of Gods content. I
Yeah, they
believe
added a
they're
lot.
gonna do Fakatsu no F content. So they Uub must have been in there. I hope.
I want to say that he's in it, but I have no real memory whatsoever of it.
Right.
And isn't that telling though? Like I have very little memory of most of that game that didn't just, you know, and I reviewed it. I wrote articles about it. I wrote multiple articles about
Did
it.
you play the entire game? You beat the whole game?
Yeah, yeah, from start to finish. But I just
Shit.
have, well, I mean, I didn't complete it. I finished it.
Yeah, you didn't 100% it, but you went through the entire story mode.
Yeah, yeah. Like I didn't feel comfortable reviewing it without playing as much of it as possible, which I ultimately led me to doing a lot of the same thing 15,000 times.
Go figure.
Yeah. And even my review, I'm like, oh yeah, if you're just playing it casually, you're gonna love it. If you're gonna
Yeah.
complete it, you're in for a bad time.
Yeah, if you're trying to speed through this game to see all the content, be prepared to do a lot of grindy kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
sad because it felt like I don't know, that game could have been shorter. That's a good example of if you made the game shorter, I would have spent more time playing it.
Yeah.
The irony of that situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when so much of the game is based off of you need to keep grinding until you get through the next boss stage, and then you've got like 8 to 10 fucking boss stages. By the time you get to the 8th boss stage, you're like, I can't believe I'm fighting these Cybermen fucks
Mm.
again
And
for
I
the
remember
one
getting,
millionth time.
and when I first played it, there were a lot of glitches in the game that hadn't been patched in yet. So like at one point, my radar just stopped working. I couldn't know. I didn't know where the next. Like I had gone to get like a little collectible, and then I realized my radar just didn't function. This is like during the Saiyan arc, so I had to go find Vegeta and Nappa, like by
That
eye by
happened to
eye.
me too.
Oh, that wasn't a
I
glitch, was it? That was
no,
actually a feature.
it no. It was something I like looked into it myself. I remember specifically that part
Hmm.
because there was like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a sub quest. There's some kind of
Hmm.
sub quest, and like they give you the opportunity to continue to fly around and continue to grind for XP to make the fight easier. But like if you click on a sub quest and then you're like, not really worth my time or whatever. I just want to go fight Vegeta and Nappa. You can't. They don't show up on your map anymore, so you're just looking around for them with literally your naked eye.
I
It's
assumed it
it's
was
not
like a
quite that, but something
pre-patch
like
issue.
that.
I
Maybe it
assumed that
was
was just
that.
like a pre-patch glitch, but that's like, oh, that was so annoying. 'Cause
It
I was just
was.
like, and I'm like, it's needlessly complicated. Like it's not something that really should. Like, don't get me wrong. I get like some things. Oh, I could figure it out. I could look for that. But when the world's so big and everything is so tiny, you pass by your target without like a radar system so many times,
Uh huh. Yeah,
and it's just
especially
like it,
being
it
able to go
adds.
up so high in that world too, which is one of the things I love about it is actually the flying
Hmm.
system. But there
Oh
is a
yeah,
lot that you could potentially miss.
yeah, and you're having so much fun flying. You're like, oh, where am I trying to go? I need like a directional system to help me out with this because you just miss stuff, and that's I think a big problem with that game is so much to do, but it's all the same thing.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
Uh, well, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, I think that's all a long way for me personally to say, you can suck my dick with hopes and expectations for Uub coming
Mm.
into Super. What is on your brain? We're moving toward the end of the discussion here. We thank you guys for checking this out. But yeah, before we kind of move through to the call to action piece of the podcast where I
Hmm.
berate people with things to go do for me, what are you hoping for Uub in the future?
I hope they give him an arc. You know, that's all I really hope for at this point. I hope he has a good arc where he comes to understand his abilities, maybe has some like weird existential dread about like who he was versus who he is. Maybe build upon a relationship with him and Majin Buu that didn't really exist in GT at all.
Mm,
Because while the rest of the cast is kind of okay with Buu at this point, this isn't really the Boo that helped them out. This is a reincarnation of the guy who blew up the planet Earth. So that's
true.
got to have some weird, like, okay, I mean, I'm sure this guy's cool, but like, is he cool though? Like, if he's
Yeah.
the same evil energy, is he really good or is he, like that kind of doubt? I mean, we
We
know
know that badness that he's born out of. What's the possibility of him potentially turning?
exactly some existential confusion. I'd like to see that, like, uncertainty, even if it's just for like a couple, like a little bit, like an initial discomfort. I also want to see if they can blend the magic with the key. I want to see if they can really give Oob some unique abilities that are distinct from everything else that anyone else has so far, even Boo, and see if they can really play with that in some exciting and distinct ways. Because we've seen enough of like Saiyans and Saiyan power ups. I'd like to see some strange transformations that are just unlike anything else.
Yeah, and it's kind of like something that we touched on earlier in the discussion. I don't necessarily need to see it in terms of a transformation, but Kid Boo's ability to use magic, regenerate, turn people to chocolate, like what
Limb
does
stretching.
yeah, like what do those powers and abilities look like born out of that magic and that kind of power? What does that look like in a human body? He's obviously not going to be stretching his limbs and ripping out parts of his stomach and regenerating it, but that raw power or he was born out of that raw kind of magic and power or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What's the marriage or what's the unification of him as a martial artist and those magic powers coming together? Very interested in seeing that. But I think, and this kind of flies in the face of what we talked about tonight a ton, and getting Uub more of his own screen time. But
Mm-hmm.
I kind of selfishly want Uub to come in a little bit because I need to see Goku go into a different part of his life. I need
Mm-hmm.
to see Goku move into that mentor kind of role. I've seen Vegeta do it with Kaba in Dragon Ball Super a couple of times, and it's always cool when he falls into that little role. Goku has already openly said he's very apprehensive about it, but we ultimately know it's a role that he takes to like a duck taking to water. I need to see it happen. One thing that always kind of drove me bananas as a kid, and even now as an adult, we get to the end of Dragon Ball Z. He meets Uub at the tournament. And he's like, wow, kid, you're strong, but you can't fly, huh? Let's go. I'm going to go off and train you. And he just takes off for like 10 years and just goes and trains this kid and doesn't like go
Yeah.
visit his family at all.
Now,
Which
yeah, it's
it's
I
bizarre.
want to see how they do that. And plus, I also want to see. Plus, I think one thing also with Goku is that during the Cell Saga, he helps train Gohan, and then kind of sort of does a good job. I'm not sure because Gohan's definitely stronger for it, but he almost puts Gohan at like risk of dying. I wonder if like going off what you're piggybacking off what you just said, if when they show Uub and Goku training, they can show Goku learning from his mistakes when training Gohan and be like, okay, I kind of pushed my son
Yeah.
to go into a death match with a giant bio android. What did I do wrong then? You know, him being self-reflective on his own failures, if that's
That's
possible for Goku.
No, that's how he is as a martial artist. I mean, that's why he's very much of the I mean, he says it several times throughout all of Dragon Ball, but he's like, you can't use the same trick on me twice, motherfucker. I see it
Mm-hmm.
once and I learn from my mistakes. I believe that he would probably be that way in a mentorship role as well. I don't know. I just want Oob to come in so we can move into a different time period in Dragon Ball. Trunks and Gohan or excuse me, Trunks and Goten are still the same friggin' age, even though, but 3, 4 years have passed in Dragon Ball Super, they still appear as a 7 or 8 year old when they should be 11 or 12. We know Oob is existing in the world. When do we finally get to meet him? When we do are we gonna ever get a time skip again? We are so in desperate need of a time skip for this series.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to happen, and Oob would be the absolute perfect excuse to do it.
Agree.
Whether or not I mean, obviously, I hope that they execute with the character and make him an integral part of things and somebody who's not just a plot device to buy Goku 5 extra minutes to charge up his final attack, but actually somebody who's in the fold as like an actual defender of the earth, because he's supposed to be the successor to Goku, and he's
Exactly.
got every reason to think he will be because of the magic that he's born from or reincarnated from. To get him involved in the Dragon Warrior team, it makes all the sense in the world, and it's pissing me off that they're dragging their feet on getting him involved, and this is them with me and my balls. They're like, huh, we mentioned him, get excited, and then nothing for 30 chapters. Like,
All foreplay. No.
yeah, like
All
they just
foreplay. No
and then
engagement.
and then they twist it. It hurts. It hurts so badly. All right, so that's gonna do it for Super Dope this week. Me and Ant are trying to do these conversations once a month, Dragon Ball specific, in-depth kind of topic. We've got a short list of topics going, but we are very much looking for some suggestions as well. So make sure you shoot me an email, dbsuperdope@gmail.com, Twitter @dbsuperdope1, Instagram @dbsuperdope. And where can people find you on the socials?
You can find me on Twitter at A Gramuglia. So that's AGRAMUGLIA at Twitter.
It sounds like Gramuglia, but the G is
Oh,
silent.
you should hear the telemarketers try pronouncing my name. It's actually horrendous.
Oh, I know it, baby. We talk about it all the time.
Oh God, yeah.
Gramuglia.
Oh, I've heard some strange ones. I heard one the other day call me Grumage. Just Gramage. I think the LIA part was cut off.
It sounds. I was gonna say it sounds like they got halfway through your name and just gave up.
And they just stopped. Like, oh,
Gramage.
I'm not gonna say the rest of that shit. You kidding?
A Gramuglia on Twitter.
Also, CBR. I write there. I write for sites like the Anime Herald, Anime Feminist. I've had some pieces published in the Mary Sue and Screen Rant. I just worked on a horror anthology. We Are Horror, the first issue of which is out. You can look for that probably somewhere on the internet. Some cool stuff here and there. And hopefully more stuff in the future that would be cool to read.
Very cool, man. And the article that we mentioned today that you can find on CBR, I will put a link in the show notes. It is called Dragon Ball, the Majin Marks Power, Effects, and Secrets. Explained. Because, you know,
you have to
SEO, baby.
You gotta get the SEO in there. You gotta get the SEO in.
Oh,
and chances are, in judging by that article's metrics, there's a chance you've read it already.
If you haven't, show notes has a link for you. Make sure that you go check it out. If you do not subscribe to us on YouTube, make sure you go do that because we typically try to do these conversations live once a month. This month has been an exception due to some technical difficulties on my end, but you can go check out our YouTube at youtube.com/Dragon Ball Super Dope. You can get an uncut version of this podcast, this discussion at patreon.com/Dragon Ball Super Dope. And that's the show. That's all of it. So, Uub, Majoob, I cannot wait for Uub to show up.
You tried.
I called him Uub.
Uub. Oh, and by the way, if you don't give us suggestions for next time I show up, you'll have to listen to me talk about Bulma for an hour and a half.
And trust me and Ant are two libtard soy boy cucks who will SJW the shit out of a strong, independent woman like Bulma. Okay? Don't make us do it, but we will.
I mean, I just think she's hot, but that's cool too. I'm kidding, it's terrible.
Not only
she's a
is
great
she
character,
hot, but she's also the most brilliant scientist on God's green earth and the richest woman of all time.
She might be the most useful character, most practical, powerful, always effective, always the best character in any arc she's in, period. And I'd have a better way of phrasing that, but I'm just tired. And
words are tough, dude. Words are very tough.
Words are not easy.
When you look at it, Vegeta won in the game of life.
Yeah,
okay?
He really beat Goku in that sense. Nothing against Chi-Chi, but Bulma.
Yeah, she's not Bulma. All right, so Majoob, we'll see you soon because you got to come to Dragon Ball Super and move this story along. So with that, I'll say, Uub, please come to Dragon Ball Super. That kind of worked, but maybe not as well as I'd hoped it would.
Maybe.
Woo.